Morning. Hey, I'm excited this morning to be chatting to you guys. And this morning as I was getting ready, I thought, hey, I should share with you how my morning went down. And it went a bit like this. So this morning I woke up and I was like, oh man, I feel sick to my stomach. Maybe I should call in sick. But I think it was the nerves speaking. So then I got up and my flatmate was out. So I started roaming around the lounge in my pajamas with the iPad speaking to myself. And I was getting caught up in the moment. I was getting passionate as I was speaking. Next thing, my flatmate's standing right there. And she's like, should I come back? And it was really embarrassing because she already, she's questioning this church thing and it's a work in progress. And I was like, great. Now she thinks I'm crazy as well. So I kept going and then I got ready for the day. And then I was like, all right, see you later, Rach. Have an awesome day. She's like, good luck. And I went out the door and started walking down the drive, and I realized I was in my socks. So I had to go back and then be like, I just forgot my shoes. And she's like, yeah. So that was my morning. So I am feeling a little bit nervous, but I'm also excited to be here with you guys. And this week I have had a lot of time that I spent waiting at airports, and I was at 3 different airports, and I was watching the planes go and land and go and land, and I was on some long flights myself, and I sort of thought, you know what, it's pretty hectic how these planes even fly. And while I was in the middle of a 12-hour flight, I was thinking to myself, how on earth does this tin can fly? And then I started thinking too deeply about it, and I started hyperventilating a little bit and freaking out, so I just had to calm myself down. But it got me thinking of a story about the first time that a plane actually flew. So I want to share it with you guys. So on December 17th in 1903, after years and years of tinkering, of failed attempts, of experimenting, 2 brothers named Wilbur and Orville Wright actually succeeded and made history for man by putting the first flight of the first airplane into the air. So it was a pretty amazing moment in history, but beforehand, there was a coin toss, and the coin toss was to decide who was going to be the next one to try this attempt. So I'm thinking they've had so many failed attempts before that probably when Wilbur won the coin toss, he was probably not that excited about it. He was probably remembering all the failed attempts that they'd had, all the hospital visits that they'd had, and he was probably feeling sick to his stomach. So that precise moment in time, when man actually flew for the very first time on the 17th of December 1903, was at 10:35 in the morning. Can you imagine how he would have been feeling when finally, after all these epic fails, he was in the air flying? I'm pretty sure he would have been stoked, and all of his fears would have been replaced by excitement and some crazy joy. But have you ever thought how he felt at 10:34? When he still wasn't sure if this was going to be another hospital visit or worse, or if it was going to be the most epic moment in history. I think that 10:34 is a moment where a lot of us find ourselves in life, where we're stressed, where our heart is in our stomach, where we're feeling so nervous about something, so worried about something, so anxious that we don't even think about what could possibly happen. I think we think the same things about our big dreams. Their dream was to fly a plane. Our dreams, who knows what they are, but they're big and they're epic. And sometimes we don't even let our dreams take flight because we're so scared of what could happen that we spend our whole life stuck at 10:34 in the stress and the anguish and the what if. So here's the thing. I know that most of us, we would love to live at 10:35 in that moment of epicness, celebrating the success. But I know that most of us, including myself, often live in 10:34, panicking, stressing, and holding ourselves back. So today, I want you to think for yourself. Where are you at? Do you think, right here in this room, would you say that if you think about all your dreams and plans and hopes for the future, would you think you are at 10:34 or would you think you're at 10:35? Turn to the person next to you and you can tell them. All right, I hear some people laughing, but really, honestly, I think that many of us would have said 10:34, and that's where I find myself as well. Why do you think that is? Why do you think our plans, our visions, our dreams we have for ourselves, they can be so big, so epic, so extreme, but yet so many of us are probably not quite there yet, or we haven't taken our dreams for a flight. We're still on the tarmac. And I think that the answer is simple. I think it's because we've been burnt before. Maybe we've had a few crashes trying things out before. Or we've had loads of people hurt us, or maybe we've done so many bad things that the guilt actually just weighs us down and it's so heavy that we can't possibly take flight. Maybe you're just filled with so many what ifs. This happens, what if that happens, what if this person says this, what if, that actually we've even lost sight of our dream, or our baggage is so heavy that's holding us down on the tarmac that we have actually lost sight of our dreams and we don't even think it's possible anymore. So I think somehow, if we think about it, and if we're all really honest, we think that the clock has somehow been stuck frozen at 10:34 in many of our lives for too long. And today I want to challenge you to say that it's time to change that. So today, if you're here for the first time, or if you've been here but you've missed a few weeks, I'm going to give you guys a recap. So we're actually in our final of this 6 weeks on grace. We've been doing this grace series, and this is what we've pretty much been summarizing on this epic journey of grace. So we've looked at the fact that grace is free. It's for everybody, and it's actually our job to see to it that nobody misses out on the grace of God. We've also looked at how grace is to be paid forward once you receive it, and would you go to extreme lengths to even ripping the roof off just so that your friend can see a glimpse of God's grace? We also spoke about how grace is actually strong enough, and it's strong enough to heal any broken relationships you have. It's strong enough to cover your weakness. It's strong enough to hold you up in no matter what circumstance you find yourself in. We also saw that grace is something that we, as a church family, as Gracegate, want to strive for, to have at the very core of our culture and who we are. So if you're not quite sure, this is how it is. So grace, it doesn't really make sense because it's so big that we can't comprehend it. It's also undeserved, because you can be the worst of the worst and God still offers it to you. And yet, grace is the best thing yet. So today, I want to take us a step further in our journey of grace, and I want to explore more of it, where I want to explore this idea of grace in motion. If we know that grace has already been offered to us by what we've heard, we know that it's been poured out to us constantly, and that it's given to us freely. There's nothing we have to do except embrace it. I want to encourage all of us to embrace it so that we can live in that moment of 10:35, celebrating victory of our dreams. So before we go further, I want to ask you 2 questions, okay? So the first one is, now that you've heard all about this grace and that it's a free gift for everyone, what are you going to do with it? If you haven't received it yet, maybe that's your next move. Or if you have embraced it already, what are you going to do with it? The next thing is, if I told you that grace was in motion, what do you think that looks like? And more than that, what do you think it looks like in your own lives? We were all made for more than just to live at 10:34 in fear. And I want to share with you a story, and it's about an eagle who thought he was a chicken. Here he is. He's very cute. Let me turn this around so I can see it as well. There we go. So this is the story. There was this baby eagle, and something happened to his parents somehow. So he fell out of his nest, and he got separated from his parents, and he was going around trying to find how will he get back the cliff, get up the top to his nest again. And he was a scrawny little thing. He hadn't quite got all his feathers in the right places yet, and he had weak arms. And luckily for him, this farmer came along, and this farmer actually, he was a chicken farmer. And so he picked up this eagle, and he's like, this is a funny looking chicken. But he was really nice, so he's like, I'm going to look after it anyway. So he took care of it until it was old enough, and he added it in the chicken coop with his other chickens. So this eagle grew up imitating chickens. He grew up thinking he was a chicken. He did all the things that chickens did. He scratched the ground and found grubs and worms. He even tried doing the crowing thing in the morning. Didn't really work out for him. But his chicken friends were super nice, and they always told him every day, you know what, you're a pretty awesome chicken. So he began to believe it, and he thought he was a chicken. And one day, this huge, awesome eagle just glided over the top of his chicken coop. And this eagle looked so free, it looked so majestic, it was so graceful how it moved. And the baby eagle was like, whoa, what is that? Who is that guy? And his chicken buddies were like, oh man, that's an eagle. Don't even worry about him. We'll never fly like he does. And so he just went back to scratching the ground and doing what chickens do. He lived his entire life being a chicken, even though he was an eagle. He was robbed of what really he could have become. And it sounds like it's just some cute kid story, but actually there's so much truth to it, because what are you being robbed of? What am I being robbed of? You know, so many of us are living the exact same thing. We're listening to what other people are saying about our lives, and we're only living to half of our potential, when actually we were born to be eagles in flight. You know, Jesus, he understood this thing of we were born for more. He knew that we were more than to be a chicken, and he was going around and he was preaching to all different crowds and all places he traveled, and he was telling people, you're made for more than this ordinary life you're in, and he was pouring out his grace on them. And then he gets to his disciples and he speaks to them, and he's like, guys, I've been telling you for a few years now that I'm going to leave you guys, so here is your challenge. And you know, these disciples, they'd been following him for years. They'd seen him do miracles. They'd seen him talk to the crowds. They'd seen him do all kinds of things. And so he pulls them together and he shares with them this awesome job description, which is about to be theirs when he leaves. And we can find it up here, and it's found in Matthew 28, verse 18 to 20. It says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then he adds in, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. This is a pretty cool job description, and I think I would love to have it. And you can see the whole complete document there in Matthew 28. So basically what he's saying to these guys is, hey, all authority has been given to me, and now I, with all authority, am giving you this epic challenge to go into the world for me and basically do the impossible. So I don't know how you would be feeling if you got that, but to fully understand these disciples first, we need to look back one chapter. And if you look back one chapter, you see that these disciples that he's giving such responsibility to are actually the guys who were denying him, who were running away from him, who were doubting him, and who were abandoning the game plan that he'd been telling them was the game plan for 3 years. So I'm thinking when I read this, why on earth would he pick them? Like, surely there was someone else. Maybe there was a rabbi or a priest or just someone really good at one of the temples there. But he actually chooses these guys. And the reason that he chooses these guys is actually nothing to do with them. It's nothing to do with who they are, but it's actually everything to do with God, with who he is, with his authority, and because of his grace and power that he decides to give it to them. So if you think about now, you're one of the disciples, okay? Imagine you're a disciple and you've just heard Jesus give you such a crazy job description. How would you react? I think you'd have one of two options. One, you'd be like, do the impossible for you, God? Yeah, sure, that's easy. I got this. Watch. Or maybe you have an opposite reaction where you'd be thinking, are you serious, God? Me, of all people, don't you know that I doubted you, I lied to you, I lied about you. I'm like, I can't even do this. I don't know which one you guys would have had, but I think I would have probably been freaking out myself. The thing is that these disciples, maybe they'd understood a bit about grace. You know, they'd spent a lot of time traveling around with God, so maybe they learned a little bit of something about, hey, it's not actually about me, but it's about God and what he's willing to do through me, and that's grace. This job description wasn't over, though. Jesus continued a little bit more, and then he says one word, and he says, wait. And you're thinking probably, wait for what? But this is what he says. It's in Acts 1, verse 8, where he continues the job description. He says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses to the ends of the earth. So first of all, he's given them this epic challenge to go into the world and stuff, and it seems impossible on their own strengths, and it is. So they're thinking, how are we going to do this impossible thing? And then Jesus gives them their answer. You can only do this impossible thing when you receive my power. And it's the same with us today. You know, the thing that changed them from thinking it was impossible to thinking it was possible was only when they realized they needed God's power to do it. When we're reading this verse, if you look up the word power in Greek and in the way it was originally written, it's actually a word called dynamos. And dynamos has a few different meanings, okay, but it's about power, and it's also where we get the English word dynamite or dynamic, but pretty much the power that it's talking about in this verse is a power in motion, a power in work, and also a power in flight. So this is a pretty big deal when you understand it, because it's not just the power that's going to make something happen, but it's a power that's going to continually make something happen. So Jesus is saying to them, hey, I'm going to give you my power, and when you have that, you're going to be put into motion straight away. And the cool thing is that the disciples got this. They got the message loud and clear. They first thought it was impossible, and then they realized that they had to wait. They received God's power, and then they went into all the world to change it, just like he asked them to do. They went with all power, they made a difference, they changed the world, they transformed people, and they set grace into motion. It's pretty cool. And the thing is, it's not actually just for the disciples back then. He gave them that job description years and years ago, but it's the exact same job description that he gives you and I sitting in this very room today. So it's not some far-fetched story. This is actually our job description and our challenge. So now how do you feel? Everyone's scared, I can see. But there's also a guy who got this, okay? So the disciples got it and they set it straight into motion. But there was also a guy called Paul. And Paul is someone that I would say is an eagle. He got it. He wasn't living life as a chicken. He wasn't living life at 10:34. He was definitely an eagle in flight at 10:35. This guy, the coolest thing, when he's writing one of his letters in the Bible, he was actually writing it to a church, and this is what he said to them. Now, this church was like grounded on the tarmac. They were carrying so much weight that grace was just impossible for them, or so they thought. And we can see what he prayed for them, and you can see it in Ephesians 1, verse 17 to 20. And he says, I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. That power is the same as the mighty strength. So again, we see two things. One, he's talking about that same power, the power in motion, this dynamos. But the other thing, if we go back one, is actually this word enlightenment. And enlightenment is actually you becoming aware of something. So Paul is praying for this church that they actually open their eyes, that they become aware that they don't need to stay grounded on the tarmac anymore, giving up on their dreams, but that they become aware of God's grace and God's power that's already with them, that they can be enlightened to it. I think that's such a cool prayer, because I actually think that we have the same enlightenment problem. You know, we've heard about this grace, we know all about it, but yet sometimes we actually need to go a step further and have our eyes opened that we can actually proclaim it, embrace it, and run with it. There's also, I want to encourage you guys, to put this grace into action, but there's a story that kind of summarizes part of it for me, and it was when I was younger in primary school, we used to have 1 hour a week where we'd have to go into the library and read books, and I absolutely hated reading, as both my parents would tell you, so I would do anything to avoid it. I'd even offer to, go pick up the school lunches or go clean out the cupboards or anything, because I hated reading. But I would go into the library on the days that they wouldn't fall for my offering to help, and I would go and I would find this one beanbag in a corner where there was some books, and these books saved me from my boredom, and they were books called Choose Your Own Adventure. So this is how these books went. You would start reading it, and then you'd get to a point, and it would say, if you want to choose this ending, go to page 79. And if you want to choose this ending, go to page 93. And you'd have a choice to pick your own ending. And you'd start reading it. And then all of a sudden, if you're like, my character's getting killed off, this wasn't the ending I wanted, you could come back and you could pick the alternative ending. Does anyone remember these books? Yes. They were pretty awesome. And I think the reason that they were so awesome is actually because who wouldn't want to choose your own ending, right? The coolest thing is, though, that I think, those books is actually like our story. Whenever we're reading our own life story and we get to a point where we're like, you know what, this story is so bad, I don't even want to read anymore. God offers us grace, and that grace is to pick an alternate ending. Eventually, we're all going to come to a point in our own story where we're like, man, I've been hurt so much, I'm heading in such the wrong direction from where I want to be. This guilt is just way too much for me to handle. This shame, I'm not good enough. All these voices in your head, where you just want to put the book down and say that's the end of your own story. But the impossible can come possible. When it feels like you're actually at the end of this book and it's so messy that surely no one even wants to read it anymore, maybe you're actually only partway through the book. You see, if you allow God to be the author of your story, His grace always has the final say. And His grace is definitely not going to leave you with your character getting killed off in a huge mess. If we keep trying to write this story on our own human efforts, we will get just human failures. We'll be stuck as a chicken. But if we let God's grace set into motion in our lives, who knows what the story we could write. If you think now about the story you're currently writing with your life, okay? Say that they've turned your life into an autobiography of the life of you. What would have they written so far? And is the story you want to be telling, is it the same as the story that you're heading in? Because if the two aren't heading in the same direction, then maybe you need to come back a few chapters and choose a new ending. Some of us are stuck in this story because we've allowed ourselves to be imprisoned by this false identity, by thinking we're a chicken when actually we're an eagle. And some of us just are carrying things so heavy that we're always going to be stuck at 1034 because there's no way all this stuff would fly. If you've been robbed of your potential, maybe you need to come back and rewrite your story. Last year, a few of us got a chance to go and go to this leadership conference, and I've changed from that kid in the library. I actually love reading now. I almost have a whole library of my own, so I don't know what happened along the way, but obviously God did some miracle. So I was going to this conference, and I was like really excited to get some new resources, some new books to learn things, because leadership is my passion. I want to learn as much as I can about it. And I want to find leaders that I can learn from. And so I was excited, and we got given this book. And this book is called, you want to read it? The Greatest Story Ever Told. Has anyone read this story? I didn't think so. This is why. Because this is the story. Does anyone see what it says? Nothing. Can you imagine how excited I was to read this book? Not that much. But then I found this little letter at the beginning. And this is what it said. It's a bit of a cryptic writing, so bear with me. Dear friend, the greatest story ever told can only be written by you. I want you to fill these blank pages intentionally with acts of kindness that add value to people. Every day, let your words be a record of how you are making a positive difference in the lives of others. Start now and intentionally make a great story with your life. How cool is that? You know, when I first got this book, I was excited to see what I could learn from it, and then seeing that the greatest story ever told could actually be my story, it got me thinking in a whole different way. And hopefully it does for you guys too. You know, the greatest story ever told could be your own story. Has grace sort of, in this grace experience, have you realized that, man, grace makes you want to go and make a difference in somebody else's life? Like that book said, that every day your record tells a story of a positive influence in somebody else's life. Maybe the chapter you're sitting in right now is an utter mess. It makes no sense to anyone else, and so far your life is anything but the greatest story ever told. The best news is that you can pick another ending. That what you choose to do by having grace in your life can become the greatest story ever told. It's not just for you, though. The coolest thing is that grace is actually not just about you. It's actually about what you do with it in motion for somebody else. I've heard it said that found people find people, that saved people serve people, that forgiven people forgive people. And I think it's the same is true with grace, you know. People who have received grace can't help but also give it away and share it with others. This chapter that you're in or have been in could be full of guilt. It could be full of so much anger. It could be full of so many mistakes that you just keep letting people down. Maybe it has a lack of direction and you don't even know which ending it's going to go. The coolest news is that you and me, we have an opportunity, no matter what mess we've been in, if we accept God's grace, we have an opportunity to write the greatest story ever told. Something that will move us from 1034 to 1035, from ordinary to extraordinary. When people see you living like that, they want in on it. You know, when people see you living at 1034, they're like, oh yeah, you're just in the mundane life like me. But when they see you living at 1035 as an eagle in flight, people are excited about that. They want in on it. They're like, what have you got? Share this secret. And the best news is you can share this secret because it's a free gift to everyone and it never runs out. So my question to you now is, how are you going to write this next chapter differently? If you keep doing the same old thing, you'll keep getting the same old results. Everybody knows that. But are you actually willing to let go of something in order to move forward? Or are you just going to nod your head, smile, and keep doing the same thing? If you think about grace in motion with this power that creates movement, if you live a life like that, man, the stories you could tell could definitely change the world. For me, myself, I've fallen off the plan so many times. I had a plan for my story to go like this, and then it ended up definitely going this way. I've missed the mark. I've let myself down. I've let God down. Man, sometimes I've held on to so much hurt that every day it just makes me angrier and angrier, and it builds up in me. I'm definitely not perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I am someone sitting here today talking about grace only because I've definitely received it myself. You know, this grace thing, it's not for the perfect people. It's for people who make mistakes and who want to try and take a new path in life. So I think, church, we need to get real today. I want to ask you this, and I'm going to leave you a moment to think about these questions. What are you going to do with this grace you've been given? And where are you going to take this grace? Because you know what really breaks my heart? It's seeing people stuck in life as a chicken, frozen in their dreams at 10:34. It's people who are lonely, people who are isolated, people who are just like a shell of their former selves or their potential selves because they don't see anything but the impossible, like how the disciples first saw things. We need more people who have experienced God's grace to share it with those who are still needing to be enlightened. Maybe for you, your sharing it could be setting the bar of what it looks like to have a family of love, of unity, or maybe it's setting the bar of what it looks like of making the difference in someone else's life daily by the small things, or by making this big company that no one's ever heard of yet. Today we have two choices. You can walk away from this and hearing 6 weeks about grace. Just smile, nod your head, and go back into your normal life. But I want to say that you can't sit here for 6 weeks hearing about this awesome grace and walk away and still do nothing about it. It's not just for someone else to do who understands it better or maybe has a more cleaned up story. It's actually for you to do, for every single one of us, because the people you meet, I might never meet. It's your responsibility. And can you imagine then if we did leave doing something about it, putting grace into motion, how would it look for people around us? How would their lives change? And if you're not the person who's already received God's grace, if you're still struggling and thinking about it, if you still don't really understand it, and you haven't experienced it yet, let me tell you that God has already covered you. He's already forgiven you, and He's already offered you grace. If you're still hanging on to baggage that's keeping you grounded, then that's up to you. You're imprisoning yourself because God says, hey, let it go. Let me tell you that when God looks at you, He sees you as perfect. He sees you as an eagle, and He sees you with somebody who can write the greatest story ever told. He's the one who created potential, and He's the one who knows what you can reach with your life. You see, the story is not over. It's not just a whole bunch of blank pages still to be filled out. Your story with God's grace could be the greatest story ever told. I'm excited to see what you guys do with it.